Hello and welcome back to Coinscrum Markets. I'm delighted to be joined today by Cesar Cerrudo, CTO at IOActive Labs. Hi Cesar, thanks for joining us.
Hi Paul, nice to be here.
So we're here to talk about cybersecurity. That's your background, over 15 years working in cybersecurity and more recently also applying your skills in the blockchain and crypto space. Cybersecurity has been in the news. Anyone that's been following crypto the last few weeks, a couple of high-profile hacks. Anyone that's been around for a long time knows that hacks have been an issue within the industry since the very beginning, from early centralized exchanges being compromised, and now more recently with the explosion of DeFi, the risks and compromises have moved away from centralized operators to code itself and compromises of code. That's securing literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of value now. And a few weeks ago, there was a hack on the Polygon network that saw a hacker, turned out to be a white hat hacker, acting, I guess, with altruistic reasons. He managed to remove $600 million worth of value, and he did also return it. And also more last week as well, on a centralized exchange out of Japan called Liquid, they also had a compromise that saw $90 million be removed from the exchange, and this time not returned. So more of a nefarious actor. So can you just start out and maybe just tell us a bit of your own history and your background, and what work you've been doing specifically around the blockchain sector?
Okay. Well, I have been doing security research and hacking for more than 20 years on different technologies. I started with database security, web application security, then operating system security, IoT. I like hacking in general. In the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, I started to take a look more at cryptocurrencies and blockchain because I really liked the technology, and I saw a lot of different challenges there. So here are we today talking about cybersecurity, but I have been long story of hacking different technologies and doing a lot of security research. So I have a general overview of hacking and technology in general.
Okay, so I mentioned this large attack on the Polygon network. At a high level, we don't want to go too deep into the technicals, and I guess there's only a limited amount of information as well. But with your background and experience, can we start by looking at perhaps the mindset of a hacker? And with these decentralized smart contracting platforms where smart contracts securing all these funds are there in the public domain, potentially there to be exploited if there are flaws in the code. Can you just elucidate a little bit on the mindset of a hacker and what they'd start by looking out for and how they might go about such a compromise?
Yes. Well, you have good and bad hackers. Usually the good ones, like me, we take a look at different technology, try to find the problems so they get solved, people don't suffer the consequences. The process could be complex. Usually finding a security problem in a piece of code or some technology, it could take more or less time. Sometimes could take 1 hour or 1 week or 1 month or even many months. So you have to put a lot of effort on that. And also you have to have the knowledge, or if you don't have the specific knowledge, you have to learn. For instance, in this case, you have to take the code or smart code contract, start looking at the code, try to identify security problems. In order to do that, you need to understand how a smart contract works. You need to understand the blockchain protocols, the different protocols working. Once you find the problem that could, like I said, could take up some time, then that's not the end of the story, because once you find a security problem, you have to find the proper way to exploit that problem to reach the goal you want. In this case, will be stealing cryptocurrency. In other system could be, bypassing some access control, getting access to a password or getting access to credit cards. But in this case, it's trying to accomplish things that run away with cryptocurrency. So in order to do that, you have to build like a sometimes a test environment where you can just start crafting the exploit and see how you could achieve your goal. Sometimes it could be easier because if it is open source code, then you can replicate the environment. Maybe you can launch or test it in a test network. Sometimes it could be more difficult if the technology is not available as open source. Maybe you have to take a different approach because you will have to reverse engineer something. It will be like a black box where you have to figure out how it works. So it takes more time, it takes more skill. So all this process has different challenges because sometimes you can say, okay, I'm already find a way to exploit this, but I face this new challenge. So you have to go again and then try to solve that challenge. And then it's an iteration that goes and goes until you finally say, okay, I find a way that I can exploit this security problem. I will bypass and solve all these challenges, and I will accomplish my goal. So after that, you code your tools, your exploit, we call it exploit, and we'll try to launch it in a test environment. Because if you try in a real environment, then it could not work. Maybe it doesn't happen anything, but maybe there is some problems that cause some problems, so people will realize and will fix it, or at least will notice that something weird is happening. And then when you try to exploit it for real, then you won't have the possibility because it could be fixed or people will be monitoring for it. So first you want to try it in a test environment, making sure that your exploit works pretty well, and then we just launch it in a real life environment and try to get successful with that. So I guess in this way, he goes to all these stages. Like I say, it could take a lot of time. When you think about the price, if you did well, it's a lot of price, because if you think for winning $600 million, you had to work for 10 lives. So if you think, okay, I will invest a year, but maybe I can win $600 million, then it worth a year effort of work, right?
Yeah.
So the goal, the price is really choosy to invest a lot of time and effort. But sometimes it could be simple, it couldn't be that complicated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have seen these compromises, especially on the DeFi, the world of DeFi, since really Ethereum started being adopted. I think when Ethereum was first designed, the challenge that the founders were trying to overcome was to be able to have a lot more expression in their code. There were so many limitations about what you could develop on top of Bitcoin with its very limited scripting language. With Bitcoin scripting language, where there's very binary outcomes in terms of that script, Ethereum designers decided to go to the other extreme and develop Turing complete smart contracts. The idea being that you could code anything into these smart contracts. And I think a debate from very, very early on was, well, that's great. That allows fast innovation, but it also creates huge attack vectors. And that's what we're seeing. And then some people will argue that, well, these open public networks are evolving like organic systems. They're open to attack. Once exploits are found, then ultimately that makes these systems stronger because they're patched, and we move forward, and hopefully over time these things become much more resilient. But I guess people such as yourselves and systems administrators everywhere would, and software developers everywhere will say there's no such thing as 100% secure code. A couple of years ago, or a few years ago, we saw the SSL Heartbleed compromise open source project. A bug had been sitting there for many, many years before it was noticed and potentially exploited. So, in this new paradigm that we're kind of working in within this industry, what's your thoughts on this? The idea of like how these early smart contracts have been designed. Is there room for improvement? Is there a compromise? I know that Cardano, another smart contracting platform, are releasing their smart contracting capabilities just next month. Their authors say that they've taken a kind of more bounded approach, whereby they've gone with a domain-specific language design, and also referenced existing taxonomies around financial contracts that have been used for many years within traditional financial markets. What's your thoughts on this overall? I know I've put a lot out there, but have we started off on the wrong foot, or is this just something where we need to carry on evolving until we find the right solution?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I have been for a long time in cybersecurity, so I have seen the same problems over and over again. So this is not a new story. When there is a new technology, present, and there is a rush to come out with different solutions with the new hot stuff, always security is left behind. People try to push code, release code, start to use it. We have seen this problem with web servers at the beginning of the 2000s. Then after that, database were also very insecure. Then browsers were very insecure. Then lately, IoT is very insecure. And it's always the same reason. You rush to market with technology because people, want to make money. They want to, make those tight deadlines, get a competitive advantage, etc. It has been always like that. In this case, it's even more serious, like different from other technology, because we are talking about a lot of money that the cryptocurrency protocols deal with. So I think the industry should pause and say, what we are doing the right thing or not? And then after that pause, define a plan on action where they try to really focus on cybersecurity. Because if not, then they just keep building on top of weak technology. Mm-hmm. So you can add an extra layer with more security, but the layer below, we continue being insecure. Like I said, this has been the same story with different technology. And also on top of that, you have developers that maybe they are very good at creating technology, writing code, etc. But not all developers, I would say 90% of the developers, they don't manage the basic security compass. Or some of them understand basic security compass, but they don't know how to properly code them, how to properly implement security solutions. And that's a very common problem. You can have the best security API, the best encryption, etc. But then at the implementation time, if the developer don't know how to properly implement in a secure way, he will make mistakes. And when you are rushing to market, those mistakes cost millions of dollars, as we are seeing now. So I think that the best solution will be, try to pause, say what we are doing, try to be with security conscious. That means that you have to think about security from the very beginning. Like an example of you are, building a 20-story building. When you are at the last story, you realize that the foundation was weak, then it can collapse. It will be very difficult to fix. So if you don't start from the security from the very beginning and introduced in every process of the technology development, then if you just care at the very end, that's not going to work. I mean, you can fix some security problems, but not all. Like I said, this has happened all the time. Look at, big technology vendors like Apple, Microsoft, Oracle. See the story on the security problems they have in the different technology, and you will see the same story repeating over and over again. Rush to market, lot of problems, then they pause, they make something more secure, then next stage. We continue seeing security problems for it on iPhones, on Microsoft operating system. They are less problem now, but 15, 20 years ago, there was a lot of security problems. And I think we are at that stage right now with cryptocurrency, especially with DeFi.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that you often see, so many projects coming to market, you don't really know if it's a two-man team that kind of learned to code last year, or, maybe get some insight if it's a much bigger team with a higher profile. But more often than not, they make a big song and dance about the fact that their smart contracts have been audited by a third-party auditing firm. Some may say we've had like 4 audits from 4 different firms. Do you think that gives a false sense of security to the end user? I guess, having your code reviewed by an independent third party is naturally going to help spot some potential errors, but there's still limitations, I guess, and errors and bugs are still going to slip through the net. Do you think people still need to just kind of be that much more careful and not put all their trust in the fact that these contracts have been reviewed?
Yeah, there are many limitations, because when you do a security audit, you get a limited budget and limited time. So after the time and budget is consumed, that's the finish line. So of course, people working on that do, like my company, we do the best job we can do, but we are limited by time and budget. So we try to find all the problems and get them fixed. But then that doesn't mean that there are not more problems that maybe we missed because we didn't have enough time, or we didn't have maybe enough knowledge, because over time, when you have more and more technology, it gets more complex. So it's very difficult for one person, doesn't matter how many years experience, to understand all the implications with all the different protocols and technologies around. So over time, it gets more complex and more difficult to identify the problems. Sometimes it could take, like I said, with SSL, there was some years and then people find a problem. And the same could happen with DeFi, of course. So people, doing a security review is good, but I will be more interested if the project doing the security review can prove that they care about security from the very beginning. If they, they show the threat model, they explain how their development life cycle is, how security is integrated, what the different security testing they are doing besides just last minute security review, etc. So that would be a lot more helpful. And also, in the end, it's also about incentives. Right now, a lot of people are putting blindly the money on DeFi, so they don't really care, or they don't understand sometimes the risk. So that's a reward for the projects. If you go out quickly to the market, you will capture all that money. So there is no incentive right now to make a really secure solution, because all projects know that they just need to speed to market to grab the money from people that is willing to put it in a blind way, right? So I think usually people understand security problem when they suffer the consequences. You can have maybe money locked down in a DeFi project and don't have any security problem, so you will trust it. But then maybe you lose 100, 200, $1,000, $1 million, and then you will start worrying about it. And I think, sadly, that's how it works in security and technology in general. That's what I have seen all this year. People really get worried when they suffer the consequences, and then they start pushing the developers to make a more secure product. But until now, until there are no incentives to make more secure technology, they will just keep going. That's sad, but that's how it works.
Yeah, I guess so. For all the headlines that DeFi in particular has attracted, it's still a very small market in real terms, and mostly people interacting with it are probably relatively tech savvy. They've probably been trading crypto for a while. They do understand, they know those risks are there, and they kind of accept them. And we keep seeing these compromises, and there's barely a murmur in the market, and people just move on and deal with it, which is fine for now. And while we're in this early stages, you alluded to that we probably still are when we look back and compare it to the evolution of earlier technologies. The challenge will be, and especially because we're dealing with value here, not just some email addresses or passwords being compromised if a system's hacked, then how we get over that hump for what everyone's hoping for a much more broader mass enterprise and institutional type adoption going forward, because they're really not going to, they're not going to just sit back and kind of stomach these types of risks, and they just won't engage if they think they are there. So I guess that remains to be seen. And if we step back a little bit, if we look back a few years, one of the big challenges for early centralized crypto exchanges was their security compromises and regular hacks. That did seem, or has seemed to improve a lot. Those venues and operations have learned, they're much better funded. They might have much better systems. But we are still seeing compromises happen. And again, we spoke about false sense of security a little bit earlier. More recently, we've seen new technologies for storing and protecting private keys emerge. A few years ago, the most secure form of cold storage form of storage for private keys was cold storage, where completely air-gapped private keys, potentially quite secure, but also not very lacking in utility and efficiency when you're dealing with lots of transactions. So we've seen the emergence of multi-party computation solutions where keys are sharded effectively across multiple hardware devices, secure hardware devices, and only no device is ever party to the entire private key. So in theory, that's a very secure system, but also brings a layer of efficiency. Now, with the recent hack at the liquid exchange in Japan that we mentioned earlier, just from what's been reported in the news, for their hot wallet layer, which would generally contain less funds than what would be on deposit in cold storage, they were using a multi-party and MPC system, but that's where the compromise happened. Now, the debate is, was this new technology flawed itself, or was it a case that human error came back into play? And there's other weaknesses in the chain which are there to be compromised. So, it's not safe just to put all your trust in a new technology if it's supposedly secure. There's always room for human error. And maybe there was issues around policy controls accessing that, or API access points. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will be more I don't know the details, but I will be more inclined to think that it was mostly related with human errors, because when encryption could be really good, really secure, but then key management is always an issue. I mean, you can have a very strong encryption algorithm solution, but then if you leave the keys around, then any criminal can get the key and sign a transaction, steal the funds, etc. I have seen this with some protocols that are used in wireless communication. Really strong encryption, but then you realize that the vendors that ship the devices with the key writing on the top of the device. So it's just crazy, but that's real. So you can think about this. Okay, you have multi-party computation with different keys, with different approaches, but then that solution could have an API. That API is programmed by developers, and they could make mistakes. They could mismanage the keys. They could be exposed. Maybe you just make an API call and everything is authorized automatically, and the transaction goes through. So these kind of mistakes, if the complete solution is not properly audited, that they can be not seen on time, and then you realize when you suffer the consequences. But always when dealing with encryption, it's very important to think about the right implementation and key management. That's where all the problems are, key management and implementation. Technology could be super secure, the best technology in the world, but then when implemented and when the keys are managed, it could be a lot of problems in that area.
Mm. And do you think in the long run that we're never going to be able to rely 100% on software and security implementations themselves? Are we always going to rely on old-fashioned solutions such as insurance policies, and that when we get enough history in this industry and enough time for insurers to assess risk better, and what their risks may be if they're insuring smart contracts, for example, or ensuring exchanges security, do you think that's always going to play a part, and that we'll just find the right balance where there's always going to be some level of risk? Insurance can play a role, and that will be no different in in this future world of decentralized finance?
I think insurance can play a role, but they won't insure reckless solutions, right? I mean, if you insure your house for possible fires, then the insurance companies, if your house gets on fire, then if the insurance company know that you were playing with fire inside your house and you have some inflammable materials all around, they won't give you any money, right? The same with different kind of insurers. They make sure that you have the the correct procedure in place, that you are compliant with different regulations, etc. They don't give you insurance for free, and they make sure that they will make money, and they make money but not paying, right? So, or paying the less amount of people. So I think insurance can play a role, but it should be like a last resort solution, last solution of, sorry, I can find the word, like the ultimate solution when there is a problem. But the main solution should be to make sure that you put the best effort on making something secure. And in order to do that, like I said, you have to think about security from the very beginning and embed it in the whole development process. That's how security has evolved with different technology. Like right now, operating system we are using right now, like Windows, Mac OS, Linux, they are more secure than 10 or 20 years ago because technology has improved. They weren't fixing the problems. They had added, they have been adding more protections over time. So they are a lot more secure than 10 and 20 years ago. But that took place in all this year, and there was a process, there was an investment, there was people think about solutions, security solutions specifically. So now in the crypto world, people are more focused on solutions, not on security. They just want to build something, they just want to give services, they want to make money. But security is not embedded on all that. Until they realize that it should really embed security, then it should improve over time. But I don't think we are there yet, and it will take some time. Also, there are some confusions related with blockchain, because we all know that blockchain technology is very secure because the way it's architected, designed, etc., is like secure by design. But that doesn't mean that everything you build on top of that will be secure, because like we said, we have developers, problems, human error, etc. But that's a big confusion. Sometimes, okay, this is blockchain, this is cryptocurrency, so crypto is secure. It's not like that, because there are many layers of technology, many things at play, and people sometimes get confused with that.
Yeah, I think you see people do have so much belief in these, just because of the stories that perpetuate about the technology that is this amazing secure. These amazing secure systems, but there's been many flaws found in Bitcoin's code base since the very beginning, and quite often these have fortunately been discovered by core developers and patched before they become publicly known. But that's even what's considered the most robust blockchain out there has still had its own flaws over time. Do you think something like, is it even relevant around standards? And we were talking about insurance and like to be able to, properly assess risk. Are there enough standards, or do we need to see more standards in the space when people, designing these things, especially as we're working towards, we're seeing, this next wave of innovation around and a lot of conversations around interoperability and the idea of knitting these different networks together. And then, is that layering risk upon risk?
Well, standards are like a good reference, because then when they get implemented, it could be a complete different story. You can see that with some encryption protocol for communications. The standard is very good, very secure, has been audited, peer reviewed, etc. But then developers implement it and it has security problems. So it's a good reference, but then you have to make sure that the implementation really reflects the standard and is very well implemented. So I was going to say that I think right now we haven't seen the worst. I think the worst is still to come, because maybe there's a lot of hacks, but I think that we don't see more hacks because this is relative new technology. So the bad guys are still learning it, so they have to develop the skills. So if we continue producing insecure technology, the bad guys will already develop the skills and we'll be able to hack even more than that. And I think that's going to happen if things keep the same way. If security doesn't start improving very soon, I think it will just be more common, the hacks on DeFi and related projects.
Yeah, that's the concern. It's just that sort of nagging doubt. And I just think with, again, coming back to the fact that dealing with these kind of huge quantities of value, these open targets, is going to be that ongoing challenge in terms of building the ultimate trust for really that mass adoption, if it's to be achieved. So just obviously, we've discussed everything here. I mean, looking forward, you just, as you just said there, you think potentially, we're yet to see, bigger issues in the future. But given again your background and experience within other sectors, I mean, are you confident that ultimately this has a bright future, and that one way or another, we will find solutions together as an industry, and eventually we'll reach a point where we get the right balance between being able to trust this enough, having enough fail safes in there, even if that is relying on insurance at some level within the mix?
Yeah, I think so. Over time, it will improve. When the right incentives are in place, it should get to improve. Because right now, if you think about centralized solutions like the traditional financial system, they are pretty secure. I mean, if you have your money at your bank, that you can get to the website, put your username and password, then you have two-factor authentication. You will get a code by email, SMS, or you can have a token. That works pretty well. I mean, people get some scam related with that, but it's not easy to hack. I mean, it's mostly the hacks are related with attacking the people, attacking the user, not the technology itself, not the system itself. And that shows that this is all system, all technology, traditional technology, but it's working pretty well and it's not commonly hacked. But like I said, if you go 15, 20 years ago, then probably they were suffering a lot of hacking, a lot of problems. So again, yeah, I think it will improve, but first we need to have the right incentives. If they don't appear, then everything will keep the same. If you have, for instance, you have a project, you are getting money from people, and then you don't have any responsibility for that money, then why you should care? I mean, the people give you money for free, you can play with it. So we need to have the right incentive in place. I don't see that right now, so I think it would take some time.
Okay, all right, we'll keep an eye out. We're just running out of time, but we're speaking to you from Uruguay. So just take the opportunity. There's been a lot of news in the last few months about crypto adoption, especially in Central America, the news out of El Salvador. What's your view on the ground over there in terms of crypto as an asset class, as an alternative form of currency, and also just as a technology and how it's being viewed?
Yeah, adoption is growing fast, and there is a lot of ongoing interest. Most younger people tend to get in more quickly, to trust it more quickly. The older people, I would say more than 50 or some years, they don't really trust cryptocurrency. For them, it's like something new, difficult to trust. They prefer the traditional investment vehicles. But people that is on technology, not necessarily on crypto, people that are in technology, they realize the importance of this. They realize the future, the implications in the future. So they are pushing, adoption, developing solution, or getting interest on different projects. And also people like in countries like Venezuela, Argentina, where there is a high inflation rate, and they have some restriction accessing to hard money. So those markets are growing a lot because people is putting their weak money into hard money like Bitcoin or other tokens, right? So I think the adoption is growing. Still, there is a lot of pushback from, not much from the government, but from the financial institution, right? If you want to open a bank account and then they realize you are trading cryptocurrency, maybe they will close the account, or they will ask a lot of questions what you're doing, right? So, traditional financial institutions are pushing back sometimes, and some governments try to be as light as possible, but when they realize that it will be hard for them to get taxes from that, then they start to change their mind. Maybe sometimes they will say something to the people that, oh, crypto is good, but then from the back they are trying to think how they are getting taxed from that. So I think that's what's going on right now in a really high overview, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can definitely see that in terms of those countries with weaker economies and weaker currencies, definitely seeing that adoption happen. everything else in terms of bank accounts and those relationships and governments being positive then negative, I think that's a global problem still. So we'll tackle those together. Cesar, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you for coming in and sharing your expertise and thoughts. We look forward to having you back on to share your views at some time in the future. Thanks very much.
Great talking to you too, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.